I was completely alone when the year changed, and something else noticed. The rain had already been falling for hours, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that taps patiently, like it has nowhere else to be. I remember watching it slide down the window, one thin trail crossing another, blurring the reflection of the room behind me. The house was quiet in that way only empty houses ever are, quiet, but never truly still. Outside, everything was dark except for a single light glowing upstairs, my light, burning against the night like a mistake that hadn't been corrected yet. Inside, the air felt heavier than it should have, as if the walls were holding their breath along with me. No music, no voices, just rain, distant wind, and the soft hum of electricity moving through wires hidden in the walls. Midnight came without ceremony. No countdown, no cheers, just a silent click on a digital clock I wasn't even looking at. One moment it was 1 year, and then it wasn't. I didn't feel different. The house didn't look different. But something shifted all the same, subtle enough that I only noticed it after the fact, like realizing too late that a door you never opened is now standing ajar. That's when the quiet changed. Not louder, not sharper, just aware, as if the house, the rain, the darkness outside the glass had all turned their attention in the same direction, toward me. Toward that single light, toward the exact moment the years slipped forward and left something behind with me. I chose to be alone that night. It wasn't an accident or a last-minute plan. I turned down every invitation, ignored every message, let the phone die without plugging it in. I told myself I wanted quiet, space, a clean break between 1 year and the next, without noise or expectations or other people's voices filling my head. Just me, the house, and the sound of rain marking time outside. The neighborhood was the kind that usually felt safe because nothing ever happened in it. Identical houses, long driveways, porches dark and empty by 10. Earlier that evening, I'd watched the last cars pull in, headlights cutting through the rain before disappearing into garages. Curtains closed, televisions flickering behind walls. By midnight, I knew I was the only one awake for blocks in every direction. That thought had comforted me at first. I moved through the house slowly, barefoot, letting the quiet wrap around me. Each room felt slightly different, like they belonged to different versions of the same place. The living room glowed warm near the lamp but fell off into shadow just a few feet away. The kitchen light buzzed faintly, too bright, making the corners feel sharp. Down the hallway, doors stood half open, dark inside, as if the rooms were pretending not to look at me. I ended up back in the living room, standing in front of the window again. The digital clock on the shelf cast a dull red glow across the wall. 12:03. The numbers looked too bright in the dark, too precise, like they were watching me back. I remember thinking I should cover it, turn it away, but I didn't. I told myself that was silly. It was just a clock, just another object, doing what it always did. The curtain stirred slightly as the wind shifted outside, just enough movement to catch my eye. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening to the rain, letting my shoulders drop, letting the tension of the past year loosen its grip. This was what I'd wanted, stillness, solitude, the sense that nothing could reach me here. That's when the comfort started to thin. It wasn't fear at first. It was the realization of how much space there was between me and everything else. How far away other people suddenly felt. How fragile the idea of safety became when I thought about it too hard. Every sound stood out now. The tick of cooling pipes, the faint click from somewhere in the walls, my own breathing sounding louder than it should. I became acutely aware of how alone I was. The house seemed bigger than it had earlier, stretched by the dark. The uneven lighting made distances hard to judge. Shadows pooled where they hadn't before. I caught myself listening for things I couldn't name. straining for any sign that the world outside still existed beyond the rain and glass. I told myself this was normal. That quiet always feels strange if you let it. That being the only one awake can make your thoughts echo too loudly. I reminded myself why I'd chosen this: peace, control, the simple comfort of knowing exactly where everything was. But as I stood there, red numbers glowing behind me, curtains barely breathing with the wind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night had noticed my choice, that the silence wasn't empty, that I wasn't just alone. I was the only one still listening. At first, I didn't react. That's the part that stays with me now, the pause. The way my body didn't move even though something in the house had changed. It was a small sound. So small I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened at all. A soft, misplaced noise, like pressure shifting where it shouldn't. Not loud, not sharp, just present. It came from upstairs. I stood there, still facing the window, rain pressing harder against the glass now. Each drop more distinct than before. The sound didn't repeat. Nothing followed it. No footsteps. No voice. No second confirmation to make it real. The house settled back into quiet so completely that it felt intentional, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. The hallway light flickered once. Just once. A brief dip, a blink, then steady again. I didn't turn around yet, but I saw it anyway. The change in brightness reflected faintly in the glass. The way the door frame behind me stretched its shadow across the wall and then pulled it back. The shadow moved even though nothing else had. I waited. Seconds passed, then more. Long enough that the initial jolt drained away and left something colder in its place. My mind began offering explanations, one by one, each thinner than the last. Old wiring, the house settling, a branch brushing against the roof. These were the stories I told myself to keep from turning around. The rain grew heavier, filling the silence that followed the sound, but it couldn't cover it completely. Beneath it, I noticed something else, a faint low hum, not loud enough to pinpoint, not coming from any one direction, just a vibration at the edge of hearing, like the house itself had begun to resonate. I finally turned. The hallway stretched out in front of me, longer than it should have been. The light at the far end cast uneven pools along the floor, leaving gaps of darkness between them. The door frames on either side stood rigid and empty, their interiors black, swallowing whatever light reached them. The stairs at the end rose into shadow, the upper floor completely unlit. Nothing was moving. No one was there, and yet the feeling didn't leave. The sense that something had interrupted the night, and then decided to stay very still. I didn't step forward. I didn't call out. I just stood at the edge of the living room, listening to the rain, to the hum, to the quiet that had begun to feel stretched too tight. Would you investigate, or stay exactly where you are? I remember thinking that either choice felt wrong. If I stayed, I'd be admitting that the sound mattered, that it had authority over me. If I moved, I'd be walking towards something I couldn't see, up into a part of the house I'd chosen to forget was there. The red glow of the clock behind me felt warmer now, almost pressing against my back, reminding me of time passing whether I acknowledged it or not. Another long stretch of silence followed, too long to be comforting, long enough that the house started to feel like it was holding its breath again. The hum deepened slightly, not louder, just closer somehow. The rain kept falling, steady and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. And that's when I understood something I hadn't considered before. Whatever made that sound upstairs wasn't in a hurry. It knew I was awake, and it knew I was listening. I didn't go upstairs. I told myself I was waiting for another sound, something clearer, something that would justify movement. Instead, I stayed where I was and let the seconds stretch. The hum continued, steady and low, threading itself beneath the rain. It felt like the house was waiting. When I finally glanced back at the clock, my stomach tightened. 11:59. The red numbers glowed exactly as they had before. No blinking, no flicker, just frozen there, caught on the edge of something it refused to cross. I stared at it longer than I should have, willing it to change. 1 minute passed, then another. The hum deepened slightly, almost in response, and still the clock didn't move. I stepped closer. The warmth I'd felt earlier was gone. Standing near it now felt wrong, like leaning too close to something electrical. I reached out and tapped the shelf beneath it. Nothing happened. The numbers didn't react. They stayed locked in place, forever 1 minute before the year changed. Behind the clock, the window reflected the room back at me. At first, everything looked normal. The lamp, the couch, the darkened hallway behind my shoulder. Then I noticed the reflection was just a fraction out of sync. When I shifted my weight, the movement in the glass lagged behind, barely perceptible, like it was deciding whether to follow. I turned away from the window and picked up my phone. No signal. That didn't make sense. I was in a residential area, surrounded by houses, towers not far off, but the screen showed nothing. No bars, no notifications. The time on the phone read 12:04. I looked back at the clock. 11:59, 2 devices, 2 answers, neither of them reassuring. I tried to unlock the phone anyway, just to feel connected to something outside the house. The screen hesitated before responding, then jumped straight to the home screen without sound. When I swiped, it stuttered, as if my touch hadn't landed where I thought it had. I turned it off and slid it into my pocket, suddenly aware of how quiet the room had become again. The rain sounded closer now, louder, as if the walls had thinned. I moved to the couch and sat, facing the television without turning it on. The black screen reflected me faintly, a darker shape against a darker background. For a moment, I thought I saw something move just behind my reflection, a shift that didn't belong to me. I leaned forward instinctively. The TV clicked on by itself. Not the picture, just the audio. A burst of sound tore through the room. Cheers, music, fragments of voices all layered on top of one another, stretched and warped like they were being dragged through water. It lasted less than a second before cutting out completely, leaving the screen black and silent again. My heart was pounding now, hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Somewhere far away, fireworks echoed through the rain. Dull, muffled booms, softened by distance and weather. I waited for them to build, for the familiar rush of sound that always came at midnight. It never did. Each burst came alone, isolated, then faded into nothing, like an afterthought. It felt like the house was waiting. I stood again, unable to sit still, and walked back toward the window. Outside, the street looked wrong, too empty. The pavement gleamed under the rain, reflecting porch lights that should have been flickering with movement, with people coming and going. Instead, every house stayed dark and closed, as if the neighborhood had been abandoned all at once. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. This time, it didn't move when I did. The shape in the window remained still as I raised my hand. As I took a step back, the outline was close enough to be me, but something about it felt unfinished, like a version of myself that hadn't quite decided how to exist yet. When it finally shifted, it wasn't to mirror me. It leaned closer to the glass. I backed away, pulse racing, and the reflection vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. The hallway light flickered again, longer this time, plunging the corridor into shadow before snapping back on. The door frames cast new shapes along the walls, longer and thinner than before, bending in directions that didn't match the light source. The hum was louder now. It felt like the house was waiting for me to notice how time had stopped behaving, waiting for me to accept that the year hadn't moved forward here, not really, waiting for me to understand that while the rest of the world had crossed over together, I had stayed behind, alone, awake, and perfectly visible. Another distant firework sounded, weak and hollow. Then nothing. No cheers, no horns, no signs of celebration at all. Just the rain, the hum, the frozen clock glowing red behind me, and the growing certainty that whatever had noticed me at midnight was no longer content to stay unseen. I noticed the sound again when I stopped moving. That was the mistake. As long as I paced, as long as my footsteps filled the space, the house felt almost normal. Just rooms and walls and familiar shapes pretending to be what they'd always been. But the moment I stood still, holding my breath, listening, it came back. The same sound as before. Soft, careful. Wrong. It wasn't upstairs anymore. It came from somewhere inside the house, close enough that I couldn't immediately tell where it started. A subtle shift, like weight being adjusted on a surface that wasn't meant to bend. Not a footstep exactly, not a creak, just the suggestion of movement where nothing should have been moving at all. My heart slammed hard against my ribs, but I forced myself not to react. I kept my breathing slow, shallow, controlled, as if whatever was sharing the space with me might be counting that too. I told myself this was fear filling in gaps, that once your mind starts looking for patterns, it finds them everywhere. Pipes cool, houses settle, sounds travel differently at night. Denial can be very convincing when panic is right behind it. The sound came again, closer. This time, I felt it more than I heard it. A faint vibration through the floor, through the soles of my feet. The hum deepened, no longer distant, no longer part of the background. It felt intentional now, like something matching its presence to mine. I glanced toward the front door. It stood exactly where it always had, solid and closed. The faint outline of the deadbolt visible in the low light. Beyond it was the porch, the street, the rain, the rest of the world continuing on without me. Leaving would have been simple. Just a few steps. One hand on the handle. Cold air. Movement. And yet my body didn't respond to the thought. The idea of opening that door felt heavier than staying. As if crossing that threshold now meant stepping into something I couldn't return from. Inside, at least, I knew the layout. The corners. The distances. Outside felt vast and exposed. And suddenly I couldn't shake the certainty that whatever was inside the house would notice if I tried to run. At this point, would you leave the house? Or would fear keep you inside? The sound shifted again, closer still. It came from the hallway now, from that long stretch of uneven light and shadow that led toward the stairs. I stared down it, eyes straining, tried to catch any sign of movement. Nothing stepped into view. Nothing revealed itself. The darkness at the far end seemed thicker somehow, pressed inward, like it was being held back by effort alone. My pulse raced, but I kept my face neutral, my posture loose, as if I were alone and unafraid. I didn't want to announce myself with panic. I didn't want to confirm that I was prey. I swallowed and listened, counting my breaths, grounding myself in the sound of rain still tapping steadily against the windows. Then the floor creaked. Right behind me, I froze completely. Every muscle locked. Every thought went silent except for one overwhelming realization. I hadn't heard it approach. No footsteps. No warning. Just the sound of weight, settling where there hadn't been weight a second before. Slowly, carefully. I turned my head just enough to look toward the darkened living room behind me. Nothing was there. The couch sat empty. The lamp glowed softly. Shadows lay where they always had, and yet the air felt disturbed, like something had just passed through it and left a shape behind. The hum pulsed once, stronger than before, and for a brief moment I had the overwhelming sense that the house itself was aware of where I was standing. It felt like the house was waiting for me to move, waiting for me to make a choice, waiting for me to understand that whatever line I'd crossed at midnight could not be uncrossed. The sound came again, closer still, somewhere between rooms now, no longer content to stay hidden. I remained where I was, breath tight in my chest, eyes fixed on the dark, knowing with a certainty that sank deep into my bones. Whatever had noticed me when the year changed was done waiting. The sound came again, exactly the same. Same length, same rhythm, same soft hesitation at the end, like whoever, or whatever, made it had learned how to repeat it perfectly. That was when I realized why it felt familiar, why my body reacted before my mind could explain it. It sounded like me, not my voice, not my footsteps, something subtler than that. The quiet shift I make when I stand still too long, the way my weight settles when I stop pretending to be relaxed. A sound I'd made countless times without ever noticing it, and now it was coming from the guest room. The guest room was empty. No furniture except a bed pushed against the wall. No reason for anyone to be there. I hadn't been inside it all evening. I knew that. I was certain of it. And yet the sound came again from behind that closed door. precise and patient, as if testing how well it wore the shape of me. The handle moved, not suddenly, not violently, just a slow, careful turn, metal whispering against metal. The door didn't open right away. It paused halfway, as if whoever was on the other side was listening too, measuring my breathing, waiting for me to react. The hallway light went out. No flicker this time, just gone. Darkness swallowed that end of the house completely, leaving only the dim glow from the living room behind me. The red numbers of the frozen clock pressed against my back like heat through fabric. I didn't turn around. I didn't take my eyes off the door. Another light clicked off, then another. Room by room, the house began to dim, shadows stretching and blending together until the spaces between rooms felt less defined. The rain outside softened, as if muffled by distance, while something deeper took its place, a low, steady beat beneath everything else. A heartbeat, not fast, not frantic, calm, measured, close enough that I couldn't tell if it was mine. Soft music drifted in beneath the sound, barely there, like a memory of something comforting played too slowly. Notes stretched thin until they lost their warmth. It didn't build. It didn't guide me. It simply existed, filling the space the house no longer wanted to leave empty. The door opened wider. I still couldn't see inside the room. The darkness beyond it felt solid, like a surface instead of a space. Then, from within, came the sound again, my sound, perfectly matched to the way my breath caught in my chest. The realization settled over me, cold and absolute. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was sinking. The last light went out. For a moment, everything stopped. No rain, no hum, no music, no heartbeat. Just silence, thick, complete, and impossibly close. And in that silence, I understood what had noticed me when the year changed. Not something that followed me home. Not something that arrived later. Something that had always been here, waiting for the moment when I was alone, awake, and still enough to hear myself clearly enough to be replaced. Morning came quietly, not all at once, not with relief, but with a pale, cautious light that slipped in through the windows as if unsure it was welcome. I was still standing where I'd been when the house went dark, muscles stiff, breath shallow, waiting for something else to happen. When the light finally touched the walls, it felt less like dawn and more like permission. The rain had stopped. Outside, the street looked ordinary again. Wet pavement drying in uneven patches. A few cars parked where they always were. No signs of panic. No sign that anything had gone wrong at all. The porch light across the street was still on, forgotten after a long night. Somewhere far off, a door closed. Life, apparently, had resumed. Inside the house, everything appeared unchanged. The lights worked when I tested them. Each switch responded instantly, filling rooms with familiar warmth. The hallway looked shorter in daylight, less threatening, just a hallway again. The guest room door stood open now, exactly the way I always left it. Empty, harmless. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and clean sheets. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. The clock was running. I noticed that right away. The red glow was gone, replaced by its normal muted display. The time was correct. The day had advanced. It ticked forward obediently, second by second, as if the night before had never happened. My phone had signal again. Messages poured in all at once, missed wishes, jokes, photos of celebrations I hadn't been part of. The television worked. The audio was clear. Morning news anchor smiled and spoke about the new year with practiced enthusiasm. Fireworks footage played on a loop, bright and loud and complete, every celebration reaching its proper ending. I walked through the house slowly, searching without admitting that's what I was doing. No marks, no broken locks, no cold spots, no strange sounds. Every window was closed, every door secured. It was as though the house itself had reset overnight, smoothing over whatever had happened in the dark. I told myself that was proof enough, that exhaustion and isolation had done what they do best, that a quiet night and an active imagination could fill silence with meaning that wasn't really there. I repeated those thoughts as I made coffee, as steam rose into the morning air, as the ordinary weight of the day settled back onto my shoulders. And for a moment it almost worked. Then I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Sunlight was behind me now, filling the room, leaving no shadows to hide in. I raised my hand, watching carefully. The reflection followed. No delay, no hesitation. Perfect. I turned away. As I did, I heard it. A soft sound. Brief. Familiar. The same one from the night before. It came from behind me, and at the same time, from my own chest. I stood very still, heart racing, listening. Nothing followed it. No second sound. No movement. Just the house, awake and quiet, exactly as it should be in the morning. On the counter beside me, the clock ticked on, but the seconds felt measured, observed. I didn't look at the window again. I didn't check the guest room. Some things, once acknowledged, don't stay small. I left the house later that morning and locked the door behind me, telling myself it was over, that the night belonged to the past, that time had moved forward and taken whatever happened with it. But even now, I'm not certain that's true, because whatever was here didn't leave when the year changed. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not because I thought they wouldn't believe me, but because the story feels incomplete when I try to explain it, like something essential refuses to be put into words. Even now, thinking back on that night, there are moments that feel blurred, as if the memory itself is deciding what I'm allowed to keep. But I've learned something since then. I've learned that I wasn't the only one who chose isolation when the year changed. I wasn't the only person who turned down invitations, who sat in a quiet house while the rest of the world crossed that invisible line together. And I wasn't the only one who felt the silence press back when the clocks struck midnight. There are other houses, other windows glowing alone in the dark, other clocks that paused when they shouldn't have, other people who swear the night felt attentive. Some of them heard sounds that learned their shape. Some of them noticed reflections that lagged just a moment too long. Some of them woke to a morning that looked perfectly normal, except for one detail that refused to reset. This wasn't an ending. It was an introduction. Because when enough people are awake at the exact same moment, when enough doors stay closed, when enough houses are left listening, something notices, and it remembers. This isn't the only time someone spent New Year alone, and it isn't the only house that noticed. If this story followed you into the dark, stay with me. There are more waiting, more nights that felt ordinary until they weren't, more quiet moments that lasted a little too long, more houses that noticed when they shouldn't have, stories that don't end cleanly because some things don't. And if you're still listening, I want to know what you think really happened that night.